Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, cheerleaders, welcome to the Tatami Talk. My name is Juan. This is my Chikomi partner, Anthony. And today we have a very special guest, a good friend of mine, a former member of the Swedish National team, the Hollywood Judo National coach, and almost an Olympian too to go to the LA Games back in the day, Philippe Morotti. Yay!
Thank you for having
So Philippe, so people that don't know you and stuff, so can you tell us what your accomplishments were, like how you got in the national team and what tournaments did you win and how did you do?
Well, over a period of 10 years, I won 5 national championships in different categories. And I medaled pretty much every year, either gold, silver, or bronze. And I also won the Nordic championships, so the Northern European championships twice, which was Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Finland, and Iceland combined. And I think those are my main competition. I was a candidate for the 1984 Olympics, but I got injured a few months before, very severely in my back, so I couldn't go. So I never made it to the Olympics.
You almost did.
Ironically, that would have been here in Los Angeles, where I ended up living. I've lived here now for 30 years, which is half my life.
Yeah.
And I
well,
love
the funny
it.
thing.
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is that you didn't get to go to the Olympics in Los Angeles last time, but the next time LA gets the Olympics, we're going to that one. We'll be there.
I hope one of my
Philippe's
students
gonna fight in the Masters category.
and I get to coach at the LA Olympics. That would be fantastic.
That'd be amazing if we can go coaching.
Yeah.
Not me, but you go coaching.
We'll go coach Philippe.
Well,
I'm gonna take a spot. Get away. Yeah, I'm Philippe.
If you can make it to the next LA Olympics as a competitor, you better start getting younger.
So to explain to people, Philippe is actually one of my senseis. He's actually taught me a lot of the judo that I know and taught me how to coach. He's a head coach and mat sensei at Hollywood Judo. So same with Anthony also. So that's why we're gonna have him on the show. We're gonna talk to him about his time on the national team, international coaching, what he thinks about judo nowadays, and just get his thoughts on judo. So Philippe, what was the first question I want to ask you was, how did you get into in the first place? Like what drew you to doing judo, not karate or kung fu back in the days?
Well, I was a chubby little kid. I was 12 years old and I was not interested in sports whatsoever. But I had a friend in school who took judo and he brought me there one night. And it was kind of love at first sight. I really liked judo. And after half an hour of training, I got on the mat wearing jeans. They lended me a gi top. And I never left. I went back the next day and the next day and the next day. And I loved judo. And I guess judo loved me too. It was something that just connected from the first day. And not only did I start doing judo every day, once I got into the judo, loving the judo, I started also doing fitness every day and just training a lot for judo. Mm-hmm. What attracted me to judo was, a lot of it was that it was like physical chess. And it's the same reason that attracts me to judo still today. It's like physical chess. I also was very much attracted to the moral code of judo that you don't find everywhere. Mm-hmm. You know, it has an educational purpose. It makes people better human beings, and you find very good camaraderie in all sports, obviously, but definitely I found it in judo. I was also very, very lucky to have a very good sensei, my first one. His name is Joseph Miklevich. He was on the Polish national team, and he became also Swedish champion. And he had one of the best qualities you can find in any sensei when you start out. And he had passion for us and passion for teaching us. And he really took me under his wing. And if it wasn't for him, I would not have stayed with judo as long as I did or developed as much as I could. I also grew up in a suburb of Stockholm, you know, and the best things really come from the suburbs. In the suburbs, you don't have rich kids, spoiled kids. You have kids that are working class and they want to get out of the suburbs. They want to get ahead in life. And so we had a really good team of kids that were training. And I want to mention a few of them. One was Franz Varga, who ended up also becoming national champion, and Per Sandell, and Robert Yu, who's been to Hollywood Judo to visit, and later on,
Yeah.
Rick Almlöv, who's also been to Hollywood Judo to visit, and he now has his own Nevaza videos on YouTube. But these are all people I grew up with, and we would go beyond what was required. We would train every day. We would together Saturday, Sunday. We would run. We would, train as much as we could. And we became this little group of fanatics in the suburbs of Stockholm that didn't really know much, but we were willing to learn. And that was good enough at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the name of the friend that brought you to judo the first time?
Oh, his name was Carl Rosenstam.
Does he still train?
No, he quit shortly after that. I don't know whatever happened to him, but if he's listening now, thank you for taking.
That's great. Oh, thank you for bringing Philippe to judo, because without Philippe, a lot of this stuff wouldn't be happening. Because without him, I don't know who would be the head coach of Hollywood Judo right now, and who knows if I would be a black belt by
It
now.
took me many years to get to Hollywood Judo. I mean, there was when you're 16 years old in Sweden, if you medal in the national championships, either gold, silver, or the 2 bronze medals, you were required at the time to show up at national team training. It was called the national team group. So just because you won the nationals didn't mean you got to represent your country. You had to show up at these training camps. And these were training camps that were really tough. It was once a month, and it could be 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, but you were required to be there. Like this, you have a national group of competitors that are all the top in the country. Now, at the time when I was 16 and I got into this group, we had a national coach. His name was Tony McConnell. And he unfortunately just passed away. But he was from Great Britain, and he had the best connections that you could possibly have with Great Britain. So at a very early age, he would take us like 6 times a year to the national training camps of Great Britain. So we were very lucky. We would go over there and train for a week at a time. And thereby, we got to train with all the best of the national team of Britain, which included, of course, Neil Adams, and people like that.
Yeah.
So that elevated the status of the Swedish national team. And we were so fortunate to have somebody like him to do that.
Now, when you got on the
yes.
So when you got on the national team, how did you get a national team? Like, so you won the national tournament, or how did you place in there?
Well, you had to place in the top 3 in the national team to be in the national group. So I would place every year. So with a period of 10 years in different categories, I had like 5 golds and 3 silver and 1 bronze, and that qualified me to be training with the national team. But that didn't necessarily mean that you were selected. You could win the national championships, but if you didn't participate in the national training sessions, you were not going to be selected. But I was selected several times for several things because, I won a lot of stuff in my category. And more than anything, it was also the traveling. First round of traveling was when I was like 14. I took the train with a couple of teammates from my club, and we went to a place in Holland called Papendal. Papendal is a huge sports center in Holland and still exists till this day. And that's where all the best teams go to train to prepare for major events. Track and field, judo, you name it. And they would have every summer a couple of months of training sessions. And back then, things were not as expensive as they are now. You would get a train ticket for $50 to go to Holland, and then we stayed in the dorms, and we trained 6 hours a day. Papendal was absolutely amazing because there, yes, you could do run the retreat hours per day, yes, but there were also master classes. And the people that held these master classes were people like Hoffman, who had won silver at the 64 Olympics. There were people like Hirano, Tokyo Hirano, who I took all his classes. And I really admired, and I learned a lot from him from the age of 14 to 17, because I kept going back to Papendal every summer. There was also a man called Opa Schutte. Schutte was a Nevaza expert. You could take classes from him. It was all Nevaza. and so on and so on. So it was really, we didn't know that at the time, but it was a gold mine of knowledge in judo. And we were so fortunate to be part of that and to be able to learn a lot of good classic judo, because most of these teachers now are gone. They're not with us anymore. So that was the first round of traveling I really enjoyed.
But I know, well, I know with Tokyo style, like you took a lot away from that. And when you teach us stuff, you teach a lot of his styles. Like there's a video of his on YouTube that I send you sometimes. It's like, hey, look, it looks just like you. And then same thing with like me.
I'm definitely flat.
Yeah. Well, well, it's funny. There's a thing that we do at Hollywood that you took from him. We do this like weird cross step thing. And when I show it to people, they're like, what is that? I've never seen that before. And I'm like, oh, I learned that from Sensei Philippe. I learned it from him. So it's like this lineage thing of learning these styles.
Yeah, I
think I
was very fortunate to learn so much from him. I really do. And if you look at today's teachers, you know, that would be of the same caliber, you know, Kashiwazaki, Newaza, definitely, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And in Tachiwaza, I would say, go Tsunoda. Go Tsunoda is amazing. I really admire him.
Yeah.
But we're talking about classical judo teaching that you don't see that much of nowadays, because everything nowadays has to be in the fast track and quick results.
Whatever's most effective in competition right away, right?
Yes. Shortcuts rather than patient learning and learning the craft from the bottom up. You know? So that was the first round of traveling. Then when we started more getting serious and travel with the national team and things like that, then of course there were training camps. Every year there was one in Paris at the INSEP. INSEP was the National Institute of Sport in Paris for all sports. And there we would have all the national teams of Europe would meet there once a year for training, 1 week of training. And it was brutal. But that was also a great experience. But that was not about learning. That was all randori from morning till evening. Nothing was taught, you know.
You just went in there and fought the entire time.
Well, you're supposed to learn from your sensei. You're supposed to learn judo, you know, from the ground up as much as you can. And if you're lucky to be on a national team, things like that, there's not a lot of teaching, in my experience, at that point from the national coach. Because the national coach is more of a strategic person. And he's not there to teach you judo. You have to know judo when you get there. And that's why they select know judo when you get there.
Yeah. Well, they're teaching you how to do Ippon Seonagi correctly or how to forward ukemi right.
Nobody's going to tell you that. They take you in because of your qualities, you know. In my case, it was, I did very well nationally and in Northern Europe and things like that. But every time we traveled to major, you know, international events and stuff, I got really nervous, and I really screwed it up many times because I was nervous, and I never really could make the transition from that to a very high level international competitor. I was good at judo, and I knew a lot of judo, and I learned a lot of judo, but I wasn't psychologically prepared. There was also a lot of pressure on me, I think, at that time to perform internationally, and I couldn't really live up to that. But I took a lot away from those years. And later on in life, when I made my way back to becoming a coach, because I didn't think I would, I took a lot of the knowledge from what I talked about prior, you know, like from all these travels. I learned a lot of stuff, and I felt that it would go to waste if I didn't take it somewhere and share it with other people. And that's how I eventually got to Hollywood Judo.
So one thing you mentioned was the coach. So one thing you mentioned was the coach does a different job as a sensei, is what it kind of got from that, right? But they don't necessarily have to teach you judo. So what would you say is differentiates the two the most?
Between a sensei and an instructor?
And a coach. You mentioned the coach wasn't there to teach you judo. So what do you think what was their job at the time when you were training a coach?
A sensei, an instructor, doesn't necessarily have to be a coach. because not everybody compete. Only 5 to 10% of judokas, maybe 15 at the most percent, compete in judo. The rest are recreational judo. So coaches cater to competitors. Senseis, instructors cater to all of them. You can be both, obviously. That's why I teach coaching clinics. I teach coaching clinics for the United States Judo Association, and I hold classes with a program that I wrote myself based on all my experience in judo. And I graduate some 15 coaches every year for USJA, and it's been a great experience. I always tell them that first you have to be an instructor, you have to be a sensei. You cannot be a coach without being an instructor, but you can be an instructor without being a coach. So what we teach at my coaching clinics is the coach part, how to get your competitors ready, the physical preparation, mental preparation, the day of the competition, you know, all these things that goes into the competition area. We don't teach them, you know, 3 different taiotoshis because that's the instructor's job. So there's a differential here between the two.
Okay.
So
that's good to know.
So with your part on the national team, what was your favorite thing part of the national team? And what didn't you like? Like, did you enjoy the traveling? Had to be fun, but the cutting weight. Did you even cut weight back then? Was that a big thing back then?
Yes, I was competing under 71 kilos, and I was always losing about 4 kilos. I was always between 71 and 78, and towards the end, I competed up to 78. But when I was 16, 17, and I started to think that maybe I wanted to be a better competitor, and I, you know, wanted to do more outside of Sweden and this and that, I pretty much skipped out of school. I became a bouncer, and I'm no different from the rest of us back then. We were all living on the edge. We were bouncers. We made ends meet, and we were just training 6 hours a day. We didn't have to train 6 hours a day. You can get really good at training 3 hours a day. But we always thought back then, old school, that the more you train, the better you get. And we were always overtrained and injured and all these other things. Had I known then what I know now, I think I would have done better, and a lot of us would have done better. We just didn't know.
Oh.
So we made a lot of sacrifices in order to be able to travel, to do judo, to all these other things. But the benefit of it is the friendships, the learning of judo, and to see other countries. Mm-hmm. To be concentrated on something and stick with it. Not everybody can become a champion, but you can take something with you that is worth more than that, and it's for life. There are many champions that do not teach judo. Once they end their competition career, they stop judo altogether. So there's that, and there are coaches I know that were not very good competitors, but they became very good coaches because they have an insight. They have a way of discovering and seeing something in another person, and they're able to take that, whatever that is, and spin it and develop it into something of a higher class. And that's what the coach is for. Recognize the talent in others, know how to get them to improve, and so on.
Okay. Well, one thing you touched upon right there was talking about overtraining and having injuries and stuff. Now, in judo, we all have, I think it's just all martial arts and stuff for all combat sports people, that more is better. Like me, I'm just joking last time about his knee, and the doctor said, okay, put your knee in this brace for 2 hours. You'll be fine. As a martial artist, we think, oh, 2 hours is good. 4 hours is going to be amazing. So and it's a big push thing with martial artists. Like, what do you recommend when like people are injured or just like judo injuries?
Well, let me start.
Judo, how do we?
We had a guest come to Hollywood Judo a few years ago. No names mentioned, but he was a trainer, a sensei, and he said that, you know, if you have one guy who does 300 uchikomi per day and you have another one who does 500 uchikomi per day, the guy who does 500 uchikomi per day is going to win. Bullshit. It doesn't work that way. You know, it depends how you do uchikomi, and everybody is different. Everybody is different. if it was so easy, if it was that easy that the one who trains the most is the winner, then we don't need to have any competitions. Okay? There are many variables that goes into making a champion. You have to be talented, you have to stick with it, you have to have self-discipline. And one thing very important, because I know a lot of parents that want their kids to be this and to be that, you know, those kids, they have to want it themselves. You know, if you don't want it for yourself, no coach in the world can get you there. You have to want it badly, you know. And injuries, unfortunately, judo is a combat sport. You will have injuries, small ones, hopefully, sometimes larger ones. And you have to rest and recover, and you can train smart, you know, take some days off here and there, let the body heal, train hard, but train smart. And it's a balance act, and we're all made differently. What works for you, Juan, and for you, Anthony, may not work for me, and so on and so on. So you have to find a rhythm that works for you, and take it from there.
It's like how I messed up my I can't remember shoulder. One time I was just lifting weights too much. You know, you're just like, I'll get one more set in, and then you're like, I'll pop. Oh no! I broke something again.
Because it's also how you choose your exercises. You know, a judoka, for example, is not very important if he can bench press 250 kilos. You know, my question would be, for how many minutes can you do that? You know, a judo match is 4 minutes, efficient time, 5 minutes. And then, golden score and what have you. How much you bench press is not really going to be relevant during that time. So your training, your physical training for judo has to reflect the demands of judo, quite simply. And my day job, I do have a day job since we don't make money in judo. We're
not getting rich off this.
I'm a personal fitness trainer, and I do train people all day long. And when I get a new client, for example, I always start out by asking their restrictions. You have bad knees, bad shoulder, bad this, bad that. There's no point in me having, you know, somebody do heavy squats who's got bad knees, and I'm going to ruin that person. Yeah. And so for judo, you have to train smart. You have to train in a way that it mimics the demands for your competition. And there are special programs for that I've developed, other people have developed. And those are the ones you should stick to if you get good at judo. So.
Now, when you're talking about like which programs, what kind of fitness programs do you recommend to do for judo? Would you recommend like running?
Well, something very popular in the last few years is called CrossFit. You have CrossFit, and CrossFit is actually very similar to the demands of judo. However, there are some exercises in CrossFit that are maybe not so joint friendly. You know, you cannot jump up high on a bench and slam your knees, 500 times without paying a price for it, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
But you can develop a circuit training with exercises that are good for judo, and where you work 20 seconds on each station. You do 8 stations, 6 rounds, for example. And that's excellent training for judo because your heart rate's going to go up like crazy, just like it does during a match.
Okay.
So those are the type of exercises. If you go to a gym and you do 3 sets of 10 of something and you rest 2 minutes in between, you go chat with a pretty girl or something, you come back, that's not going to do much for judo.
How did you get your Shodan, and who did you get it from?
Oh, my Shodan, yes. So again, going back to Papendal in Holland, you could take kata classes there, one of many classes. And I took kata, I was 17 years old. And at the time in Scandinavia, you were not allowed to have a black belt until you were 18. There was an age limit to black belt. But I took the kata class all week, and on the last day, I went for it. I performed my kata. I had to do 7 matches to win at least 5. And I had to make technical demonstrations and all this and all that. And the man who supervised all this and standing like a Eiffel Tower over me, staring very angrily at me, his name was Jan Blooming. Jan Blooming was the rival of Anton Geesink. And he was a very tough guy. But he was the examiner that day for all the showdowns. And fortunately, I passed. So when I came back to Sweden and I presented a certificate that John Blooming had given me a showdown, they couldn't really say no. So they gave me my showdown at 17. So at that time, it was me and my friend, Per Anderson. We were both there in Papendal. We were both 17, so we were the youngest to get our black belts back then. But it was tough. It wasn't a walk in the park at all, you know. And that was that.
Was the grading system back then same as now? Like you need competition points and all that kind of stuff?
Yes, you could get Dan's competition points. By the time I was 24, I actually had competition points till I think 4th Dan, but I never turned them in because when you compete, you don't really care about which Dan you have. It's not important, and I'm not so sure it's important at any time in your life. You know, unless you're running a club, you're a sensei, and you have a website, and it says 6 Dan.
Like the first things that people look at.
It becomes important, but this is such an inflation of black belts. You know, there are many ways to get a black belt, and I think it was a little bit more difficult back then. But it also depends very much on where you are, which country you're in, different criteria, which part of the country, you know. It's like anything else. Some are going to be tough, some are not going to be tough. At the end of the day, because I promote people up to sundown, at the end of the day, you're the one who has to carry your belt. You're the one who has to go into a club. And if you don't deserve it, if you look bad, you're going to look bad, you know. So don't be in a hurry to get, you know, those belts.
Yep. And if you give it to someone who's not deserving it, then it makes you look like if I walked somewhere with a shodan and I do a complete crap throw, then
well, it depends.
It make you look bad.
You're a brown belt now. It depends where you walk in. I mean, you're a good brown belt. In Japan, you get your shodan relatively fast.
Yeah.
If you walked in with a shodan in Japan, you would pass pretty well, I think.
When I trained in Japan, I could tell who the showdowns were.
I don't know anymore what the criteria is, but I was never impressed with belts. I was always impressed with what people can actually do on the mat. That's when you see what people are made of.
So going back to you training on the national team, what was one of the best memories you've had, or the longest lasting?
One of the best memories?
Yeah.
I think when I won the Scandinavian Championships and the national anthem was playing, I think that was really, really nice. But some of the best memories besides that are really adventures that we had when we traveled together. You know, I had good teammates, and when we would travel and we would train hard, we would party hard, we would get into trouble sometimes. So there are a lot of stories that I won't get into here and now, but when you're young, you know, you have to also live a little bit. You have to have some fun. And we had a lot of fun with it.
So just to give a comparison, because here in the U.S., you can probably win the USA National Championship just by fighting best of 3 or someone, or 2 or 3 matches. How many matches did you have to fight to win the national championships?
Well, funny enough, you brought it up. Sweden has the same amount of judokas as the United States, more or less. I think about 25,000, somewhere around there. But Sweden is a country with 10 million people. The United States have 340 million people. So judo is very popular now in Sweden. When I was a kid and a teenager and a young adult, obviously it wasn't as popular as it is now. But for me to win, you know, a junior national championship, I had 36 people in my weight class.
Holy
wow. We're talking 6-7 matches. Absolutely.
That's a lot of people.
Another thing is that we had local competitions almost every weekend. You know, we had all these competitions that were national competitions, but they were local and people traveled. And judo didn't cost anything back then. You didn't have to pay a lot of fees to enter a competition. In fact, it was free.
Okay.
And so on and so on. And it was part of the training to go and compete as much as we could. So every other weekend we competed for sure.
Mm-hmm.
We were in our cars driving somewhere, even if it took 8 hours, and we slept. We couldn't afford hotels. We slept in the dojo. We slept on the tatami, and that was fine. You know, if you're willing to do something, you have to sacrifice in order to get there. You know, and
are you giving me permission to sleep at the dojo now?
Now I don't know. Everything is different. Also, you know, I don't know.
You're gonna sell your house, get rid of everything, move to the dojo.
So you mentioned local competitions. I'm assuming there was back then, even then, there was only one national organization in Sweden, and they organized all of that too. Or was there some sort of like
yes,
Shikai, just kind of like we have here, and it's like a grassroots local one that's.
Well, most countries, some nations combine judo with karate or wrestling or what have you. But most nations nowadays have a judo federation, just one, and Sweden does, as far as I know. The United States has 3 by tradition, and it hasn't exactly helped. No. I'm not an expert on why there are 3 or why they never merged to one. Now with the alliance, they're trying to merge as one, and I really hope that happens, because there's no reason why, for example, a sandan in one organization has to go and pay, fees to the other 2 organizations to be recognized as a sandan by them. It's a moneymaker. It's not fair to the judokas, and it's not only for the belt promotion fees. It's for everything. I'm a member of all 3 organizations because I'm the head of the dojo. I feel I have to be. The dojo is a member of all 3. But to what purpose? We pay triple on everything, and for what? And you also have within those 3 organizations people that are very high up and in ranks and stuff. And there's rivalry and dispute between them. And I think it's just absolutely ridiculous. There should be one organization. Make it happen, make it work. I don't care what it takes, but it would make everything so much easier for everybody.
I agree. I really agree with that one right there.
Yeah.
So you're saying those local competitions were organized by the Swedish National organization. So they had like the national org involved in the grassroots judo.
Well, back then the Swedish, it was a society, also was a socialist country. I know socialism is a very bad word in America because it's confused with communism, but that's not what it was. So basically what happened was this: we had a club in the suburbs that was a martial arts club. So we had judo, karate, kendo, aikido, and between all these, we had almost 400 members. So the city gave us mats. The city gave us facilities and mats for free. Why? Because we kept kids off the street. And the memberships were more or less free. And we did the community a great service. So it was a win-win for all. Now, as far as the organizations, yes, they would put on big tournaments and what have you and organize them. But everything was done back then pretty much idealistically. The budget for the national team back then, when I was part of it, was absolutely ridiculously nothing. Mm-hmm. Now, I think the Swedish national team has a great sponsorship and great leaders,
great right now,
great competitors, and everything much more organized. Back then, we took the bus and the train, and we slept on buses and trains, and it was a jungle trip from the beginning to end. So things have changed.
Yeah. Well, now with them being sponsored, getting sponsored by the state and stuff, you see them doing better competitions. Like even you have a friend of your son now actually competes internationally, and he's actually done pretty well, hasn't he?
Yeah, Macias. Yes, he's excellent judoka. And in 2014, I took 6 of the members of Hollywood Judo to train with the Swedish national team in Stockholm. And it was an experience for all of them. They loved it, you know. And here's another thing. We went for the training camp was for 1 week, and they learned a lot, and they got beat up and all that. But then we stayed an additional 4 days because when I was younger and traveled, I saw a lot of cities and countries, but I never got to see much of the country or the city itself. It was go there, compete, and then leave the next morning and on to the next. But I wanted my students to learn something of a different culture and see something of a different culture. So after the training camp was over, we spent an extra 4 days just going around Stockholm. And it was great for me to take them around Stockholm because I hadn't been there in almost 30 years.
This is my favorite restaurant, but it's closed.
Well, things had changed.
You know, it's like,
Not so much.
where did this building come from? Wasn't there a park there before?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That was very emotional and it was great, you know, and I would like to do something like that again. Yeah.
So out of all the instructors you named before, which one was the most memorable? Was it you've told a lot of stories, so I want to know which one.
Well, they were memorable for different reasons. Hiran, obviously, because of his technical ability, and he was a fascinating personality. He was a very dynamic, you know, physically, intellectually, and I learned a lot from him, and so on and so on. I also had the fortune, because in that little club in the suburbs, one day we got, you know, noticed that Anton Gesink was coming for a weekend to our club. So we quickly gathered all the talent we had around Stockholm. We put together all our best black belts and what have you. And we were sitting, anticipating Anton Gesink, and we were all lined up, the dojo. He was in the locker room, and he comes out, and he's wearing a blue gi. That was the first time I ever saw a colored gi. And Gesink was the one who wanted to introduce colored gis, but it would take another 20-some years before the colored gis were accepted. But that was the first time. That was in 1977. And it was a great training camp with Gesink. I even did some randori with him, and he played with me like a rag doll.
I was going to say, how did that go? Did you catch him at least once?
I was 17, and in fact, he would grab me with the fingers like this. But he was huge, but very technical and very interesting to train with. Wonderful person and a wonderful personality. Had a great sense of humor, no ego, nothing like that. Because I've met some mean instructors too in my life, but you know, the people that really know what they're doing, they are confident enough that they don't have to be mean to other people. They can be generous with their knowledge. And those are the ones you remember the most.
Now that you mention it, I've never ever seen you wear a blue gi.
No, I've never worn a blue gi. I've always had a white gi.
He bought a blue gi one time.
I gave it to you.
He bought one time. Yeah, he gave it to me.
My life.
He bought one and was like, nah, I'm not going to wear this. Here, Juan, have it. I was like, oh, thank you. I'll take it.
I think I'm just conservative about that. And since I'm not competing, I've had 2 hip replacements, and I don't, you know, engage too much in too much action. I just teach. There's no reason for me to have a blue gi. I stick to my white gi. And
very traditional.
Yeah.
Have you ever trained with Neil Adamson? You mentioned him.
Yeah, so a lot.
Oh.
When I was 16 and we started training in London, we went over there on all these training camps. I trained with him a lot, and he's 2 years older than me, and I know he was amazing, and it was great. Speaking of, you know, having the opportunity to train with somebody great. He eventually became world champion. He got 2 silver medals from the Olympics. I mean, he was awesome. But we trained with people like that a lot, especially when we went to those training camps in Paris. There were a lot of people like that. Those the stars of those days, they were always there, you know.
So, how did you get into coaching? Because you were already a sensei here when I moved to LA.
Yeah, when I came to the United States, I left Sweden in 1986. I was 26 years old. I lived in Italy for a year. I trained there. Then I lived in Paris for 2 years, and I was a member of Racing Club de France, which is still there. It's a club in Paris where the national team was training, the French national team. And ironically enough, Neil Adams at that time was the head coach, the instructor at Racing Club de France. Mm-hmm. And you had all the best French players there. And I had a full-time job, but I would go there every night after work and I would train judo. But I was already in my late 20s, so I wasn't competing anymore. Then I ended up coming to California in 1989, and I became a member of Sotel Judo Club for a while. And I trained there for a few years, and then I started to get health problems. I had hip replacements and things like that. And I seriously thought that I would never do judo again. I didn't think it was in the cards for me, and I was very depressed about that because judo has been the most significant thing in my life. It's been the thing that I've taken with me everywhere I've gone. It's been my passport to the world in a way. So for a few years, I couldn't do judo, and but then I started to rebuild myself physically, and I thought it'd be nice to at least do some technique, some training, something. I don't feel good if I don't do judo.
Yeah.
And I stumbled upon, I found Hollywood Judo, which was a pretty, at the time, run-down club. It had its heydays in the 50s, 60s. And
you hurt me.
Well,
you hurt me, Sensei.
Not your fault. There was a wonderful sensei when I came there. His name was Sensei Emmy, Frank Emmy. He was 8th Dan. He was very, very old, and eventually he passed too. Yeah. But he kind of liked the way I was moving and my judo, and he asked me, before he passed, he asked me if I would be an instructor and would train. And since I didn't have anything else going for me really, and I saw it as an opportunity to get back into judo, I decided to take it seriously. So we went from having 2 training sessions per week to eventually building it up to 5 training sessions a week. We got a new mat because we needed a new mat. The old mat was not even mat. I don't know what that was. You know,
our old mat was crazy. It was like it was like tumbling mats with foam on top of it, and then a big giant gray canvas on top of that. And that was our mat.
So we built the platform. We got real good mats. I managed to get some sponsorship from outside. And the club started to fill up. And we also started to get people from other countries coming.
How many people did you start with?
What's that?
How many people did you start? Like when you joined, how many people were in the club?
When I started, I think Juan remembered better. What, 15, 20 people there, something like that?
Yeah. If we're lucky, maybe I say maybe of like just members of the dojo, we had maybe 10 to 15. But of regular people that would come and train, if we had people that regular train, maybe 6 that would regularly train, and I was one of them. It was like me, Sensei Moss. It's just me, Moss, Matt, Lieberman. What was the Korean sensei's name? Lee, Sensei Lee. Yeah, those are like the guys that I just remember. So I can only remember like 5 people on top of my hand that were training.
It was pretty sparse. And then, all these changes, we started to get a lot of members. And not only beginners and intermediate, we also got some advanced people that came from other countries. We got one former member of the Egyptian team. We got a former member of the British team and so on, Mongolian team, this and that. And they really liked what we did. So today we have 115 members representing 22 countries. We're now 10 years later. I came to the dojo in 2010. We're now 2020. We represent 22 different nations, people from all walks of life, different religions, different belief systems. But everybody at Hollywood Judo, it's like a family. Everybody get along great. And I would say if the rest of the world got along as well, it would be a better place. So I'm really happy with what we've done with Hollywood Judo, and we're not done yet. We also started competing, and we did really well. The last 5 years, we won the California team championships, the best senior team, and so on and so on. We've had national champions. We've had people do really, really well. We had a girl last year winning the Junior Olympics. So I took my training job seriously. And I've had help. I couldn't do it on my own. I've had help by other instructors. But we made a good team, and the idea was to take something. I also felt the responsibility because Hollywood Judo was founded in 1932. And I felt that I was handed over something that was an antiquity and that I needed to preserve it well. So
yeah, we can't die.
But all joking aside, I was also very ambitious of getting competition results, getting some financial aid from outside, which we did. We were able to build a gym. You know, I wanted us to be self-contained, that we don't charge a lot of money. It's not like jiu-jitsu. Our memberships are a fragment of what a jiu-jitsu membership is. But we provide a lot of training, not just judo, also physical training. And it's a family, good camaraderie and good spirit, good people coming together.
You never taught anyone or coached before you came to Hollywood Judo then?
Yes, I did. When I was a teenager and I was traveling to that Papendal and Holland and all these, my club helped me with the train tickets and things like that because I didn't have any money. I skipped out of school. I left home when I was 14, so I was pretty much on my own. And because the club helped me back then, I was training the kids classes. I was a kids instructor when I was in my late teens. And then when I was 21, I became the head coach of Judo Club of Stockholm, Stockholm's Judo Club, it's called. It still exists. And I was the head coach of them for a couple of years. So yeah, I did teach before, but when you're younger, you concentrate on competitions, teaching is really not the first thing on your mind. But I had done it, and I also combined with I had great teachers myself. I saw how other people taught me. Therefore, I could teach them, our new students, the same way that others had taught me. And that's important, that you know how to teach because you were taught yourself in a certain way.
So was there an adjustment period that you had to pick up, or was it like very natural?
Well, that's an interesting question. There probably should have been an adjustment period, but there wasn't because there was so much to do and things kind of developed on their own. The people I started training, they were sort of intermediate, but I needed to get them, you know, ready for competition and so on and so on and so on. So the whole thing took on a life of its own. And as the club was growing, so was I, because I had to also live up to the task. So I continuously educated myself and I found inspiration, and I went back to old teachers, old techniques. I modified them also because the rules were changing. Things were changing. I had to adapt. Everybody had to adapt. If I had just kept teaching what I learned back in the 1970s, it wouldn't have worked as well as it did. So I had to educate myself also.
So do you have any recommendations or advice for people who are just becoming instructors or coaches?
Well, keep an open mind and don't be afraid to draw from people that you admire, people that you think have great technique. Learn from them and don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't pretend to be somebody you're not. You know, it doesn't help. And in California, we don't have a lot of judo compared to France, Japan, even Sweden, actually. So we cannot afford to turn our back on each other. We have to stick together, join forces. And for example, if I have a student who has an ability for Tomoe-nage, but maybe I'm not the best Tomoe-nage teacher, but I happen to know somebody who is, I can send my student over there and ask, please, can you teach him or her a good Yoko Tomoe-nage for competition? And that's not being a bad coach, that's being a smart coach. And, you know, you cannot do everything on your own. You have to sort of draw from others that know something you don't know also.
So that's a really good advice. You briefly talked about the rules and how they were different. So what do you think about the rules right now compared to back then?
Well, I assume we can start with the leg grabbing because that's what most people
Oh no.
Well, my personal opinion is that Igor Kano invented judo. I think we can all agree to that. And I don't see how anyone can just go in and take somebody's invention and tear it apart and make something new out of it. I don't think that's part of the original idea. I think that what they could have done, they could have kept, for example, Morotegari, Teguruma, Kataguruma, for example, those three, let's say. Mm-hmm. And anything that diverged from that would have been given a Shido. But if you do a clean throw of those three throws, I mean, come on, that's judo, you know.
What about the one I always bring up? What about Kami Basami?
Well, Kami Basami was dangerous for other reasons. You know, that was very harmful in many ways. So fine, take that out. You know, forget it.
Was it legal, Kami Basami, when you were still competing?
Yes, it was legal. Yes, it was. But they took it out in the 90s, early 90s, after I think it was a match between Yamashita and Endo, where Endo did Kami Basami and broke Yamashita's knee. I think that's what happened, something like that.
Yeah.
After that, was, you know, but that's a whole different discussion. The leg grabbing, I think they should have kept those three, and then from that on, they started to paint themselves into a corner with all the Shido systems. You know, the Shidos went haywire. You will get a Shido for this, a Shido for that, Shido for this, Shido for that. And to me, at least, in my humble opinion, if you have too many Shidos for things, you take away the competitor's creative mind. Because a competitor has to be aggressive and creative and move forward and attack. And if you put too many restrictions in his or her head, you can't do this, you can't do that, you sort of cripple the judoka, you cripple the competitor. You restrict them so much, they're more worried about what they cannot do than what they can do. So that was one of the challenges, since you asked, that I had to retrain myself in teaching competitors, because I had to find a way that they were still thinking progressively, even with all these. You had to reprogram people, you know. So it's been problematic, but not only for me, I think for many coaches. You hear many complaints about the new rules. It's been too experimental, and I think a little too restricted. So we'll see where it all ends.
So the IJF justifies it, or the people who defend the rules justify it as saying, like, it's creating more dynamic judo for audience to experience. Like, from your perspective, competing back then compared to now, how has the style changed due to the rules? Like the gripping, the attacks, pace of the match, the stalling?
Look, you have some wonderful judokas nowadays, you know, some really technical, amazing people, there's no doubt. As far as back then and now, I think there was less grip fighting, obviously, back then, for better and for worse. I think somewhere in between today and back then would be ideal. Now there's a little too much grip fighting, can go on forever without anybody doing anything. Now they give Shido for too much grip fighting, but for a while it was just grip fighting, and it's boring. You know, even under the best circumstances, how many friends can you say you took to a judo competition and they sat there fascinated all day? I mean, I couldn't bring people.
Not even people who train judo.
It was really hard to describe the rules back then. Now, to describe the rules, I mean, it's boring.
Well, it's also, you take someone like, say, Winter National. So these are judo rules today. When that clock turns for the next year, there might be a new set of rules. Be like, hey, Juan, I thought that was legal. Oh no, they changed. I'm sorry. No, that's not legal now.
Yeah, I understand it. The spectator, but try to explain it to a competitor.
Yeah.
Get them to reprogram. That's the worst part.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, those are the times we live in, and you know, my job is not to. Nobody cares what I think. You know, I'm nobody. So.
Oh, I care.
My job. I
care what you think.
Well, thank you. That's very nice of you. But my job is to make sure that we do the best with the current rules under the current circumstances. That goes for everything.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there are alternative judo competitions and there are alternative organizations and all that. And that would be all fine if we had 10 million judokas, you know, we can experiment with this and that. But we don't have that many. So to start to break up into different organizations that have, you know, different clown rules and all this stuff, you know, good for them, but it doesn't help really. We need to unite and stick with what's legit, I think.
So if you had a choice to change one rule in judo, what would it be? An IJF judo?
Just one, pick one?
Just one. If you can only change one thing.
I can pick one. I would allow people to have same side grip for a little bit longer. Because, so what if I have a same side grip? You know, if I go in, you can still lift me up and counter me, you know, and so what? As long as I'm not defensive, as long as I don't stretch both my arms out and push you away, then I'm passive. That's different.
Yeah.
But so what if I have same side grip?
It opens you up to the Russian tie and the other grips too.
It's just a different stand.
Yep. Well, that's a very interesting. I expected most people to say like grabs or like.
Well, of course I would welcome back, as I said before.
Yeah.
Kataguruma, Teguruma, Morotegari. I would welcome those three back. Absolutely.
Okay. I think that's enough talking about like grabs.
Okay.
Do a whole thing about that. So, from your time doing judo, Sensei, from like when you were doing judo to now, what are the like big differences you see now from how you did judo to how we do it now?
Well, we talked about the rules. That's one thing. Another thing is, I think judo has become a little bit more commercial. I mean, there's more money now for competitors. They can get endorsements that they couldn't get before. More people, more high-end judokas can get endorsements. They can actually make a living through judo. Judo is well spread in certain schools, in France, for example, Japan. Judo has definitely branched out on grassroots level in the schools, which I think is excellent. And instructors now, some of them can actually make a living being a full-time judo instructor. That was very rare back then.
So let's be clear, you're talking about worldwide, not in the U.S.
Worldwide, yes. Yeah. Worldwide.
We're not making money in the U.S. just yet.
What's that?
We're not making money in the U.S. just yet. It's still a ways to go.
Yeah, and I think, you know, America is about making money, and you should reward people that are good at what they do. And my reward was never money. My reward was, you know, I was grateful that I learned something, and I learned a craft, and that was my reward. I never expected money, and I never got any, and I didn't expect it. It was fine. But nowadays, when I look at young judokas that sacrifice a lot, I think they should be rewarded for it, you know?
So it just kind of leads into the next question is, how do you think we can make judo more popular in America? Because we've heard other people talk about it, and they're always divided on whether it should be in schools or in college or in MMA or something to help make it more popular.
Well, you need, they always say, oh, we need a star. You know, you had, you know, people like Kayla Harrison and Ronda Rousey and great people that everybody knows they're fantastic at judo. I don't know how many more thousands of members we got into judo because of them. I really don't know. And I'm not being sarcastic. I'm just wondering. I think judo needs to go into schools. You have also competing against jiu-jitsu as far as members. Jiu-jitsu charges a lot more money than a judo club does, yet they have better organization than we have. You go to a jiu-jitsu tournament, you know exactly what time you're going to compete. You go to a judo tournament, you sit around and you're asked for 8 hours and wait. So that's one difference. That doesn't really help judo.
Mm-hmm.
And good for jiu-jitsu, they have it all figured out. So maybe judo should learn something from them. Also, judo could learn something from high school wrestling programs, things like that. Judo still operates in backwards somehow. And I'm not the right person to say how it's going to be done because I really don't know, but I just observed those few things that I mentioned, and I leave it up to others that know how to fix it, but somebody should try to fix it.
Do you think the culture is just different in America compared to people abroad, and why they, I mean, recently when we were doing an episode on the American Judo Development Model, someone actually responded to me that does the other podcast, Abram, and he said that the one of the things that the USA Judo said was youth participation in sports in general, like athletic sports, is going down throughout the country. It's not just judo, so they feel like we're competing for a smaller pool.
It does make sense. You know, the American pastime is basketball and football and the traditional, baseball and the traditional American sports, where you have millions and millions and millions of kids that participate in. So if those are down, you still have millions and millions and millions of kids participating. But if you take a sport like judo that only has 25,000 practitioners and they're down, then you're going to feel it right away because we don't have an overflow of members. Now, when it comes to young people today, I don't know, I might be saying the wrong thing here, but I also think that a lot of young people today are very much interested in technology, the internet, their cell phones, watching things on YouTube, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think also that it has led to physical laziness in a way. When I grew up, I didn't even have a television. We didn't have television, so we trained all day. That's what we did.
Mm-hmm.
If I had then YouTube and cell phones and all that, I may not have trained as much as I did. I do understand the temptation of technology. I totally understand. I'm just saying it could be one explanation to why things are the way they are.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned jiu-jitsu earlier. I think their competition numbers are better than judo, like the percentage of people that compete, but there's still like a minority. So there's a lot of recreational people participating in jiu-jitsu. What do you think judo can do differently to attract more young adults and not just kids?
I think we should have more exhibitions. We could go to, a fair or outdoor market, put out some mats. That's what we did back in my day.
Mm-hmm.
We would hand out flyers. We would do judo exhibitions, and people would come, parents with their kids. They would have questions, because not too many people know what judo is. It's very anonymous still.
Mm-hmm.
And once they see it, I think they'll like it. So we should have events where we invite people in and we show them what we do, and out of 100 people coming, maybe 4 or 5 comes. But if you do that every couple of months, eventually you build up interest, and they go home and they tell others and so on. You have to start somewhere. You have to try something.
Well, I think we got to let people know that we're around. I think a lot of people see, I always keep going back to this. I'll see John Wick and I'll see the cool throws in and joint locks, and they'll think, they'll look it up and like, they'll see a BJJ school near them and they'll go to a BJJ school. Where they don't know that most of the stuff he's doing is judo and sambo, where they can go to a judo school instead or go to a sambo school. So I think it's just about us getting out there that judo's here. We're not that expensive. We're actually one of the cheapest dates in town. We're only $50 a month, but it's that we're here. People don't know that. People they don't even show it. Like, we always got to go back to, hey, well, if you do judo, it's an Olympic sport. You can go to the Olympics. They don't even show us on TV. If I want to watch judo in the Olympics, I have to download an app or look for a special video or something. It's just about getting out there that we're here, that we're still around. They're not just some lost art. That's just my opinion. Getting more advertising.
Also the level of violence, you watch on TV and so has gone up. nobody reacts anymore to bloodshed and things like that. And MMA feeds right into that. There's some very skillful MMA players. I'm not going to say anything bad about MMA, but people like to go and watch it because of the brutality of it. Let's be honest, some of them. In judo, we don't have the bloodshed or the brutality. It's a very controlled sport, and where we teach for kids a moral compass and all these other things. And that used to be our strength. But I think, unfortunately, it has become our loss because we're not as spectacular as the MMA sports are. You know,
one of the things that,
stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things I always think about when I to talk about dojo's advertisement, getting people in, is that we have this built-in being humble. Judo's supposed to be humble. We're not supposed to be flashy and be boasting about our skills when we do. We're supposed to be humble about everything. So, like you talk about yourself when we talk about getting funding, and we're like, oh no, we don't need funding. We're okay. It's like, no, it's okay. It's okay to get funding for stuff.
Yeah.
We don't have to be poor. Okay, we're not begging. We're just trying to get funding to help us. And I think that's just a judo mentality.
Money is needed everywhere. Money is needed everywhere, and you can do a lot of things. It's better to have money than not to have money. Not just in judo.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Always.
My father used to say, money is not going to, make you necessarily happy, but it's going to give you a freedom of choice. And he said, don't ever underestimate freedom of choice. So that was my lesson.
If you weren't able to train judo and you had to pick something else to train, what would it be? A different martial art or a different sport?
I would never have got into sports if it wasn't for judo. I wasn't a sporty person. I wasn't interested in sports at all. When I was a kid, I played classical guitar. If it wasn't for judo, I would never have started running every day, lifting weights, into fitness. The only reason I started to get into fitness, and eventually, ironically, became my profession, was because I wanted to be better at judo. I wanted to be in shape for my judo competitions.
I had the same experience. I hate running. After I started judo, I started running.
If I had never got into judo, I don't know what I would become. I have no idea. But I'm glad I stuck to judo. I've had a rich life because of it. And I don't mean financially. I mean a rich life as a person. Thank God for judo, It got me through the most hardships anyone can think of. Judo was the only thing that stayed. Everywhere I went, the first thing I packed was my judo gi. And I came to a new city, a new life. I joined a club. I went to train judo. And from there on, I met wonderful people. I mean, I owe everything to judo, actually.
He kind of side-skirted the question, but I'll let that go. I expected him to say Aikido or karate or something.
Oh, different martial. Well, when I started judo, we had, I was in a martial arts club, so we had karate and aikido. So the first year, in fact, I did judo. I did some karate and aikido at the same time, but very sparse, just a class a week or something. But I really preferred judo by far, so I ended up in judo.
Mm-hmm. So compare the judo from when you were playing and how you like people back then to who you like now. Which players do you like to watch now? Like, who catches your eye that you like to watch competition or matches or throwing? Who do you like to watch?
Well, there are a lot of good ones. I mean, if I have to pick three, I would pick, my first choice is Ebinuma from Japan.
Mm-hmm.
I like his sportsmanship. I like his judo. I like his style. To me, he's like a perfect judoka. He's the embodiment of judo. Mm-hmm. There's a guy from Kazakhstan in 60 kilos. His name is Smetov. I love Smetov.
I love watching him fight too.
Fantastic. There's a new guy who was junior world champion. He's on his way up now. He's actually ranked #1 in the world right now in 66 kilos. His name is Lombardi. He's from Italy.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I see why.
Lombardi. I like him a lot.
I see why you like him, yeah.
No, I like his judo a lot. He's very, very, very. And he's young and he's yeah. So those three are the ones I'm looking at, but there are obviously many others. Usually when people want to pick, so ask about some sport, they always bring up the heavyweights, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and boxing and judo and so on. And I never really understood that because I like to watch the light middleweights and so on. I mean, I like to watch the heavyweights too, but I look at the more, you know, interesting judo in the lower weight classes.
It's more dynamic, you know, speed,
Yeah.
Yeah,
techniques.
everything.
You know, just yeah.
More judo.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's interesting also to watch super heavyweights go at it. I mean, sure. But if I have to pick, I'd rather watch, you know, the lighter weight classes. And
Yeah, I mean, I started judo because I watched some lighter weight people fight, and as someone who's heavier and taller, I try to emulate the same things they do, and I just can't move that fast.
yeah.
So another thing that's happening nowadays is that, like all other dojos, our dojo's been closed for the virus. I don't want to say it. I might catch it right now if I say it. But so, what's your interpretation about dojos being closed, dojos reopening, things that other dojos are doing, like how we ourselves, like you and me, are both having practice in the park? So, what do you think about that?
Well, I'm a judo instructor. I'm a judo coach. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. There's a lot of information flying around on the internet. Some sensational, some lies, some misleading, some facts. I'm not always the right person to separate one from the other. I don't know what to believe. But I do know a couple of things. It is a real disease. It's contagious, highly contagious. We closed the dojo for a reason. One of the reasons is liability, because we are at the Japanese Cultural Institute on their grounds, and they would be liable if something happened. So that's one thing. And another thing is we have to care about our fellow man. If there's a risk that somebody could get infected and die, and I facilitated that, I would feel terrible. So like you said, we closed the dojo, we moved outside. We're in the parks, I give some classes, you give some classes. We're wearing masks, we're not changing partner. And is it ideal, great judo? No, it's not, but it's better than nothing. And I think that we came up with a pretty good solution given the circumstances. We're being careful, we're being respectful. And if somebody thinks that what we're doing is still not enough, they don't have to show up. And I understand that they would think it's not enough. So under the circumstances, we're doing the best we can with what we know. I also know clubs that are open up and they're training like nothing happened. And that's a risk that I was not willing to take, at least. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I know for us, we were willing to reopen when the city was going to reopen, when Los Angeles was going to reopen.
We were for a minute, and then we found out that it was probably not a good idea. And
the cases went up, so we found
this whole thing is not going away that quickly. It's going to be 2 steps forward, 1 back at its best for a while. We may end up opening up in a couple of months if things are looking good, but we may also end up closing a month later, depending on what happens. It's the virus that dictates the conditions, not us.
Well, Anthony, is there anything else you want to ask? Any more questions about Sensei Philippe's past?
I think we covered a lot, and we don't want to ruin the book that he's going to come out with in the future, right?
Yeah.
Philippe, if anyone wants to contact you for any questions or dates or give you money or something, how should they contact you?
Dates would be welcome. I'm single, so I would like that. If you want to contact me, you can go on Hollywood Judo website, hollywoodjudo.com, and scroll down to my name, and there's my email. You can email me. Yeah.
So if you want to contact Sensei Philippe, you can actually get through him through the Hollywood Judo website. His email's directly right there. If you want to look him up also on Instagram, you can go on to Hollywood Judo's Instagram or Hollywood Judo's Facebook as well. He gets those messages. Is there anything else you'd like to promote, Sensei, right now, or is that it? That's it? All right. So if you'd like to follow us, you can please like, share, and subscribe on YouTube. You can follow us on any of the major podcast channels that we have. We have our email address on there. If you want to leave us a message, send us something. If there's a topic you guys want to talk about or something you're interested about us talking about, let us know. You can follow me at @the_Juan on Instagram. You can follow Anthony at Anthony Throws on Instagram. Please like, share, and subscribe, and be good. Anthony?
See you guys next time.
Thank you for having me.